Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I will give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I would like to introduce you to Chris Furr. He has been in congregational ministry for more than 15 years, and he is an author of the book Straight White Male, a faith-based guide to deconstructing your privilege and living with integrity. So he's here to talk a little bit about himself, his book, kind of his journey to where he is today. So thank you so much, Chris. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Sarah. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little and share a little about the book. So I have been in ministry my whole professional career. My mom says that I started articulating that as a calling by around the age 15. I don't remember that way, but she's probably right. Moms usually are. So, early on, I had this desire to be in community with other people, to be in a field that helped other people, helped impact other people's lives. And so I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is on the coast of North Carolina, about an hour north of Myrtle Beach, if people know where Myrtle Beach is. Or if they've seen One Tree Hill, they may also know Wilmington. That's where One Tree Hill was filmed. So that was my hometown. It's my parents' hometown. It's my grandparents' hometown. So we have a lot of roots in that part of the country. And so that's where I grew up, and going to church, part of a healthy church community with good role models as the pastors there. And so I grew up there and went to college at UNC in Chapel Hill as a religious studies major, and with the intention of going into ministry. That was a religious studies major at a state sponsored university is not Sunday school. It's not a faith-based curriculum. It's, religious history and critical learning about New Testament as a piece of history and a piece of literature. And so it was good, but it also made me wonder if church really was the place for me, because I saw a lot of open-mindedness and willing to explore among my classmates. And that wasn't always what I saw from people within the church. And so I just didn't know if that was the environment I wanted to be in. I also didn't know if I wanted to carry the expectations that go with being a pastor. A lot of people have certain stereotypes or things they assume about people who are in ministry, and I didn't know if I wanted to be sort of pigeonholed that way. And so I wasn't really sure what to do, but there's nothing really to do with a BA in religious studies except go to more school. So then I went to end of undergrad. I decided to go to Duke Divinity School to do a Master of Divinity program, and really just to see where that would take me. I say that was probably the most ignorant decision of my life, because I didn't know research. I didn't know what I didn't know anything about the program. I didn't know anything about the faculty. I didn't visit the school until the night before, about the first day of class. But it was absolutely the right place for me, and my formation there sort of helped restore my faith in the church, to see beauty in the church, um, to accept and understand that that's what I was gifted to do. And yeah, that's that experience, those 3 years there sort of, I think, shaped and formed the kind of ministry that I wanted to do. So I went from there. I served in my wife and I got married right after I finished divinity school. We lived in England for a year. I served 3 Methodist churches in England, and came back to the U.S. I served First Christian Church in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of D.C. for 7 years. And then we came back to North Carolina, both of us being from North Carolina. All of our families are here. So so we came back home with our kids before they were starting school, and been serving Covenant Christian Church in Cary, which is in the Triangle right outside of Raleigh, which is the state capital. That's over 7 years now. So yeah, so that brings sort of the thumbnail sketch of what brings us to this point.
And so you mentioned when you were first going to UNC that you were kind of surrounded by open-mindedness and you
Hmm.
weren't necessarily seeing that in
Hmm.
the church. So how has
Hmm.
that changed? Because to write a book about deconstructing your privilege, I think that's
Hmm.
definitely an open-minded viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there were the very first class I took at Carolina was the Introduction to the New Testament with a New Testament scholar named Bart Ehrman, who's he's sort of church nerd, famous, as a person who has written plenty about the New Testament, but he's not a person of faith. He's an agnostic, and so it was one of those big freshman lecture classes with 300 people in an auditorium, and he's laying out all of these things that were challenges to things that you know anybody who was in the room who had grown up as a person of faith. If you wanted, so for my mind, if you wanted to, I just sort of decided, I think, facing the things that he was bringing to us about this formation of the New Testament and um, you know. Different issues with its formation and doubts that we have about who wrote what and et cetera. Um, that if I couldn't reconcile myself to those questions, then I didn't really have a faith I could stand on. So, um, I saw a lot of my classmates who sort of who didn't want to deal with those questions. They shut that out. They didn't want to hear um, and spent time belittling him. But what I saw, and actually was amazing. The last day of class, he spent the time, telling us his story about how his faith evolved and to where he stands now. And you go to his office hours, and he would sit with like not an English translation of the New Testament, but the actual Greek New Testament, and it's like this guy knows what he's doing. He's spent a lot of time thinking about this. He's educated himself. Like he's able to stand in front of us, 318-year-olds who think they know everything and articulate his story. And I didn't think there was anybody in the room who could have done the same thing with the same kind of, having done the same kind of search, that he had done. Um, so that was really sort of the way I made up my mind to go about my education. But then at the same time, I saw things happening in the church that really disappointed me. This debate broke out, not just in my congregation, but in surrounding congregations about the inclusion of LGBTQ people in the church. And there were people that I had, known and loved and looked up to for years growing up in the church who had very disappointing viewpoints on that I was surprised and disappointed by. And 9/11 happened, and we had this whole there was this friction around how much America are we really is really should be introduced into our Christian faith and in our Christian worship. And again, I saw a lot of people who just really weren't willing to consider an alternative viewpoint to theirs. um and I didn't want to be in an environment like that. And so what changed, I think, for me, accepting people will disappoint you. I mean, that's true of just human relationships, right? I mean, people will disappoint you, and you will disappoint other people. We're not perfect. We're going to let each other down occasionally. And that doesn't make those people all one thing or another. They're not that disappointment. It's just that they're not perfect. And so, we have to accept that. And I think for me, what helped me was when I was in divinity school, I actually went back to my home church as an intern, right? As a person who was there to learn ministry from the pastors. And, I was, I got to participate in all kinds of things. I helped dedicate a baby for, that was the first child of somebody I was in youth group with. I was in the room when one of the sort of the matriarchs of the church died. I got to participate in weddings and funerals, and you see the beauty of being in relationship with people over a course of time, and how meaningful that is. And so, it's not all, definitely there's struggle when it comes to reconciling differences within a body of people. But there's a lot of beauty in being in relationship with each other, and um, having deep friendships formed over time. And so, yeah, it was just kind of coming to a sort of peace with that, I guess.
Was your home church one of those that was accepting, or were they less accepting of
Hmm.
your new mindsets after, kind of realizing there were other viewpoints?
Yeah, well, see, I come from the tradition I come from is a Protestant denomination called the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And its origins are, as well, most Protestant denominations are, set out to like restore the New Testament church. Right, we're going to get back to the basics, and the idea was that should be one Christian church. We should be disciples of Christ and not Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterians. The irony, of course, is that it turned into its own denomination when it was trying not to be a denomination. But the idea is that that we can hold differences. We find oneness, we find unity in believing that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and practice charity, and everything else when we differ. So in any disciple congregation, usually you're going to find spectrum. You'll find people who are, um, who are more conservative. You'll find people who are more progressive. And sometimes until you really face a question, that you have to answer about something that's divisive, you may not know where each other sits, or it is on that particular question. So, so there was both. There was both reactions to that, and I think for me, um, I think it's a generational thing. I think uh, I'm 1980, so I'm like none of the generational things claim. I'm not Gen X, but I'm not a millennial. It's like we're our own people, but we're not as hung up on this question as, for the most part, as our parents and grandparents were. And so to me, it was like, this seems like, why are you all debating this? And then some people who said, who were very strongly against it, and I was like, I don't understand that, because I'm on a very progressive campus, right? Of the 15,000 undergrads or whatever, and there's everything under the sun, in that environment. So it was just that contrast, right, of a very open, explorative time for me in a community that's built for that, and then the contrast of a church that seemed sort of certain people within the church that seemed set on their viewpoint, and that was it. you know it was just a divisive time, I think, is the way to say it.
Right. So then when you first started out, after schooling, getting
Hmm.
into serving, were you, because you've been through a few different systems, were
Hmm.
you in inclusive churches, and were you in spaces that you were able to like kind of continue that mindset?
Yes and no. I mean, so, well, when I went to England, I mean, that was really a unique scenario in the sense that I didn't have one congregation but three, and I was only there for a year, and that's barely enough time to get to know three congregations. It isn't actually time enough to get to know three congregations. So you don't really have. I mean, you can't push people in an area where they might be uncomfortable if you don't know them, if they don't trust you. So you have to be able to establish trust before you can really, challenge people. And so I wouldn't say it was anything I really took up when I was there. When I came to the church in Alexandria, it was something that was part of when I had opportunities from the pulpit, I was clear um, about where I was. We had, over the course of time, we had LGBTQ staff there in our, we had LGBTQ folks who came and were part of the congregation. So it wasn't um, I would, they're definitely, it's a whole other thing about how churches voice their openness and their affirmation of the LGBTQ community, but it definitely wasn't a closed space as far as that goes. And then at Covenant, where I am now, that's very much been part of the church's DNA since its beginning. It's we just turned 35. So when I got there, there were LGBTQ folks, there in lay leadership, part of the congregation. It's been sort of a stated part of the church's identity from the get go. So that doesn't mean that everybody there is in the same place, like I said, but it is something. It is a place where I have freedom to say, what I think, what I believe, and encourage people to think about those same questions. And yeah, and we can tolerate that, I guess is the way to say it.
Right. So it's a place where, you're not having to hold back, and it's okay with those in the congregation. So do you think that the intersectionality between faith and sexuality is like, why is it so prevalent when we think about faith?
That is a great question. And I don't, uh, I can't say I particularly know the answer to that. There's not, I don't think just one answer to that, I guess is the way to say it. I mean, for sure, the church has been, especially recently, preoccupied with this question. And, I mean, one of the things that I write about in the book is that it's um, it's very disproportionately focused on when you consider, the texts that address um, sex between people of the same genitals, um, you know, at all in the text. And I don't, um, you know, part of it is if it's about power, because if I am in the majority, then I can sort of decide what we focus on, right? What the agenda is. There are far more teachings in the Bible about the accumulation of wealth, right? Um, but I'd prefer we not focus on that, right? If I'm a person who comes from wealth and privilege, right? Like let's deal with these other texts first and talk about these other things instead of the stuff that hits a little too close to my home. So I think that's part of it. When you're in the majority, you can you can choose to fixate on what the minority, how the minority needs to conform to whatever norms you've decided are right. And we do have this outsized, I mean, some of it is just also basic prejudice against what you don't understand or what you don't, agree with, or that you don't, I guess you don't understand is the right word, and that you don't identify with is maybe the right way to say it also. And then, I think people of faith have often made an exercise out of, sort of focusing on one aspect of someone's identity, when none of us would. I don't think many of us would talk about our sexual orientation as like the defining characteristics of who we are as a person, right? If you're a straight cisgendered person, that's, you would talk about all kinds of other things about yourself before you listed that as like the thing that defines you. to why we would choose that as like a defining characteristic for someone just because they quote unquote deviate from what we quote unquote feel is normal, um, is just not right. To me, it's sinful. I think that's and that's part of the book is trying to point that out and trying to say, look, like, this is we're doing harm actually with this, and it's not in keeping with what the whole of the biblical narrative and um, the kind of God that's described in that biblical narrative uh, teaches us about how to be as people, as a community, and so um, it's time to move on. Um, I I don't know why churches have these debates. I've been part of like church bodies having these debates, these questions about what are we going to do, what are we going to do, and I just sit there and think, imagine being the subject of a conversation like that. Just have to sit in a room and listen to people debate your personhood. And to me, the fact that there are any LGBTQ Christians is nothing but a miracle, because the fact that there's grace enough for them to belong to a body that has so often done that, to me, is amazing.
Yeah, it's a hard way to, kind of see it from your side, where it's like, we want you to belong, but then
Yeah.
we also see that there are so many people trying to not let you belong.
Well, right. Or we want you to belong, but you're welcome here. But this particular aspect of your life is something that we don't agree with and don't support. And actually, in some communities will say, we're welcome anyone, and that's fine. They're happy to have you there. They're happy to have you attending, giving. But if it comes to being in leadership, or having your wedding officiated in that community, or um, any of those things, then it becomes a problem. And so, yeah, I think clarity is important. I think there's a lot of churches that aren't clear in what they say and what they think, and then churches give off a vibe of being welcoming, but then when it comes down to it, it ends up being harmful, and that hurts everyone.
Yeah. And I think when you described the church that you're at now, you said that like the welcomingness and like welcoming people of the LGBTQ community has like been in the DNA since the
Hmm.
beginning. And
Hmm.
that's kind of that exact difference that you're talking about.
It is, but I think the thing about it, we're all. I mean, no matter how open-minded you want to be, or how affirming of people you want to be, we've all been shaped by patriarchal norms, by heteronormativity, um, you know, um, and also our understanding of sex and gender is constantly evolving. I mean, we're constantly learning more about gender identity as a concept, and what that means, and you know, uh, sexual orientation actually is a fairly recent construct, of, for human beings to think about. So, um, it's something we're constantly, evolving in our thought of. So a church can't, to my mind, a church can't say, okay, well, we've decided we're going to be open, right? Because if you don't continue to engage and think about, okay, well, what does it mean for us to affirm the LGBTQ community? What kind of community do we have to be so that we don't do harm? Because there's the intention that you have, and then there's the practical effect of how your community is structured, and what kind of practices you have, and who's welcome in leadership, and the language that you use, and all of those things that are what really make the difference. So for us, I mean, I try to, um, we're actually in the process of looking again at our statement of belief and statement of calling, which are kind of our guiding, documents, to see if we can be more clear and more specific in our welcome, because Um, and the challenge is to say in those documents what you mean, and then be intentional about living into them, which is like sort of an ongoing process. Yeah. So it's those norms are so imprinted on us and so strong that we're always going to have to be at work, working on those things to see them and understand them when they're when they pop up.
Right. Now, the book that you wrote, and like when you look at it, the title right there, the main title, Straight White Male, is in big bold print. The subtitle is not nearly as obvious, but also quite as important. So can you talk a little bit about coming to writing the book, making the decision to do this?
Well, we're in this moment of sort of cultural reckoning on some of these issues. Me Too has given us an opportunity to think about patriarchy and patterns of violence against women and inequality between men and women. Of course, Black Lives Matter and the many very visual experiences that we have had of, institutional racism sort of on display, have uh, given all of us an opportunity to face those realities in our culture. And I think when you're on the other side of that, when your identity is of the ones who have done harm, then that creates an internal struggle. And I have to decide if I'm going to really look within myself at what work I need to do within myself and in my own life, or if I'm going to retreat sort of even further into that. I think we're seeing that as a culture. Folks are saying, well, you're seeing that. I think we're seeing this right now in the conversation around critical race theory. Like, well, you're trying to make us ashamed to be white, and we're gonna retreat even further into our whiteness, right? Or you're trying to redefine masculinity, and we're going to push even further to define masculinity in this traditional way. And so you can't ask. I mean, my thought in the back of my mind all along is that you can't ask people to take on new habits. Well, most people don't leave behind old habits until they're given new ones to take up. Most people don't leave behind an old reality because it's hard. It's hard. That deconstructing, that term that's there in the subtitle, it's hard work, and there's a grief involved, and there's grief involved in the things that you've done, the things that you've said, the ways that you've behaved, the things that have happened in the past, facing history. I mean, all that's hard. And so the alternative is to not do that work, right? And then we just perpetuate, what has always been. This generation becomes like every other generation before it, when we've had this reckoning and we haven't gone all the way, to sort of set right some of the things that that have been wrong. So really the book was born out of the conversations. I mean, I know that there's some people who will take one look at the title of the book and want nothing to do with it. I understand that. I don't have any illusions about that. But I also have been part of conversations with people who are looking around and they understand that things are changing, and that they need, they want to be sensitive to what is happening. They want to be understanding of what is happening. They want to be good men. They want to be supportive of the struggle for racial justice, but they don't know how to be themselves and be part of that. So that, what does it mean for me, if in this era, what does it mean to be white in a redemptive way? How do I carry my white skin in this world? how do I carry my identity as a man in this world? Um, uh, in a straight man in this world. And so trying to give folks the tools to think about that in a productive way, because it's a lot easier to point out the problems than it is to articulate like the new habits, new ways you can. So I try to do that. The way the book is structured, just sort of lay out like, look, this is the way our understanding of masculinity, for example, has been harmful to us as men and to women. And here are some ways to wear your masculinity in a more redemptive way. And so trying to give some practical ways of thinking about that as part of it. So it's really aimed at, I think, those people who are struggling. They realize that something's happening. They know that it's asking something of them, but they're not sure what next. That's my hope for it, at least.
And what about when, like, obviously, like, kind of the three defining factors of being straight, being white, being a male. There are people, obviously, like, I am not a male. I don't have that privilege. So when your privilege is at a different level, is it kind of the similar mindsets and similar sort of things that people should be taking in deconstructing their own privilege?
Well, we all have. I mean, many of us have privilege of one sort or another. And that word is really. I knew, and I'm learning even more, that people really recoil at that word. They really struggle with that word, privilege. And part of that is because we live in a culture that prizes, like, working for things. Like, you have what you have, you worked for. And if you want something, you got to work for it. And nothing's given out for free. And so for you to imply that part of my success is not because I worked for it, then I don't meet that cultural ideal that we have, right? But there are all kinds of advantages. As a white woman, the statistics of violence against women are bad, but the statistics of violence against indigenous women are even worse, right? So that tells you, that there's some differences that are made along the way. And I mean, you can articulate them in all kinds of different ways. I mean, someone who came from who received a world-class education has an advantage over, someone who didn't have that opportunity. And so, but getting to the point of accepting that not everything I have is something that I worked for, right? I get the benefit of the doubt because of my skin, because of my gender identity, because of my sexuality. There's certain things I don't have to struggle for. Like nobody, I can walk into a church and I don't have to wonder if I'm going to be welcome, if I could be a leader. If I could, there's advantage in that. Like I don't have to wonder if my voice can be heard. And so if you can get to the point of acknowledging that, like, I have certain privileges here that, I mean, I didn't earn, right? Then, the next question is, what's my responsibility now? If I have privilege I didn't earn, is it to help others, to use the advantage that I have to help others who didn't have that advantage? I mean, I think if you're a person of faith, the answer to that question is yes. But then I think a deeper question is, if I have this advantage, why? Why is it like this? Should it be like this? Is it moral for it to be like this? And to realize that actually, even though it's benefited me, it's probably not good, right? So that means that, I have to also maybe be part of making sure that, like, just because you're a man, you don't have certain privilege, right? even though it's kind of nice sometimes, right? You're undoing the things that make your life easier. But I think that's part of it's the last part of that subtitle, living with integrity, right? I want to live a just life. I want to live the life that I think Jesus calls me to. Um, and Jesus asks that of people all the time. People come to him and say, "I want to follow you," and he says, "Okay, we'll sell everything you have, give it to the poor. Take your privilege, take your advantage, liquidate it, and then you can come." And that's really hard, but that's what Jesus asks. So, to me, it's part of the equation.
Yeah. Now, while you've been doing all of this work and kind of, expanding your horizons and, deconstructing your own privilege, you mentioned that you have a wife and children.
Mm-hmm.
So what has it been like for them while you've been on this path?
Well, I think, I mean, my wife and part of the reason that we're a match and married is that we have um, similar feelings about um, you know um, justice in the world and care for people who have been marginalized. And I think we've um, as you grow, as you mature, as you have life experiences, as the world changes, which it certainly has, and especially I would say the last 10 years or so, you figure out who you are in that world and what to believe. And then when you introduce children to it, and I write some about this in the book, it really highlights how those norms are imprinted on you, um, because you start to impose certain expectations, on your children. I have both of my children are boys. And so, you know, before they were born, we had, people were buying them stuff with trucks on them and balls on them, and all of those things that like you associate with, like, well, I mean, they're little boys, that's what they're going to enjoy, right? And then as they grow and they start to take on their own interests, right, you start to analyze, or pay attention to, okay, well, what does this mean, about who? I mean, I'm a huge sports person. My oldest son could take it or leave it, right? And so, as a dad, you like build up in your mind that this is going to be something that you have in common, and then if you don't, um, you have to examine your own feelings about that. I mean, intellectually, I know that's a ridiculous sort of expectation to have, but it's still there in my spirit. So I have to probe that. I have to examine that, and I have to think about like what kind of values, I want to impress upon them, with, um, so, if you hear, well, that's for girls, well, why do you say that? Um, well, and then I try to take them back to the point of saying, well, there is no real reason that you're saying that. Like, there's nobody decided that. Like, it's, there's no truth in that. It's just, sort of cultural expectation. So trying to, I mean, the other part of it is like trying to model a certain kind of masculinity that's healthy, for them, since, such a, I think, big part of how they're socialized and whatnot. So it's interesting. We have certain conversations about things, about stuff that's happening in the world. They have a keen sense of it. They understand, you know, these cultural conversations that are happening, at an age appropriate level, um, and just try to share where we are, and hopefully, they do their own thinking and exploring in those areas too. Yeah, my oldest is about to be a teenager. I'm interested to see how he processes. He's old enough to read the book, I would say, and so I'm interested to see how he processes it. So, be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Now, is there anything else that you would like to share with the listeners before I start to wrap things up?
Well, I would just say, part of I think one aspect of publishing a book like this is that the temptation is to look at the book and say, well, I'm not that, so it's not for me. So, or I don't have all three of those. I don't check all three of those boxes, so it's not for me. I would say that's I don't think that's the case. I think that one of the things that I've found and discovered, I guess, is that it's it can be really healing to hear things that you've experienced articulated, and that's why confessional is such a part of the book. Is to say, look, this is the reality of how patriarchy has affected women. This is the reality of what whiteness has done to people of color in this country. These are the statistics of what debating issues of sex and gender do to the mental health of the LGBTQ community. And having those things acknowledged, I think, is important, because part of the defense of patriarchal white supremacy is gaslighting, right? Well, it's not, racism's over. Like, there's not, people aren't racist anymore. There's no prejudice. There's no real prejudice. It's just time to get over that. And so, sort of denying that truth. And so I think, having that I mean, I've had people say to me, and it's not something I'm not lifting myself up as virtuous because of this, because I don't think it's virtuous to tell the truth. But I've had people say, well, I've never heard someone who looks like you say what you're saying. And it's really important to them, for them to hear that. And like I said, I don't take credit for that, but I didn't understand that was the importance of that. So I would say that. And the other piece of it is that I do have 4 contributors to the book. And we sort of isolated the variable with 3 of them. So one of them is straight and male, but not white. One of them is white and straight, but not a man. And white and a man, but not straight, and on and on. So they sort of address things from that perspective and talk about where they do have some privilege because of the certain identities they carry, and then what not being those things has cost them. And then we have a 4th contributor, Dr. Robin Henderson Espinoza, who is a trans Latinx scholar, who sort of writes about intersectionality. So their contributions are part of the book too. And so I would just say, I really tried to make it a book for everyone, and I hope it's something that people can find meaning in, even if you're not a person of faith, even if you're in various places along this journey of this discerning, where you are on these conversations. That hopefully there's something for everyone.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you mentioned the additional contributors, because I do think that brings a lot of value to the book. Now, with all of my guests, at the end of every episode, I do ask a random question. So in this season of the Super Bowl, I'm not actually going to ask you about football. I am going to ask, what is the best commercial you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you, my favorite commercials right now are I don't even know who they're commercials for, but it's the guy who is like schooling people on not becoming their parents. And they're like, he takes them to the mall and, like, you ever wonder what's the overhead is on a place like this? And it's like, no one wonders that. Sort of things that your parents say. And I was just actually laughing about this. This came on. I was with my parents this weekend, and it came on, and I was like, my sister and I text each other every time these commercials are on, because there's one of these that apply to each of you, like, things that your parents say, how not to turn into your parents. So obviously that one has stuck with me, although I can't identify the advertiser. I think it's an insurance company of some kind. But yeah, those are really good. I like those.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. I'll be leaving a link to pre-order Chris's book in the description, along with a link that'll bring you directly to his Twitter. So that is the best way to get in touch with him right now, as he's working on getting a website up and running. And of course, if you'd like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description, which brings you to all of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And a link to donate to the podcast is also in the description if you'd like to support us monetarily. And my email is there as well if you'd like to be a guest or have any comments, questions, concerns. I always love hearing from people, so feel free to email me. So thank you so much, Chris, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next week, bye.
Bye all.